everybody. This is Forrest Weaver, your dear cleric. Welcome you all to Tasting History with Max Miller's Hard Times Tomato Soup Cake. Yeah, this is a pretty interesting one, isn't it? But it's got me thoroughly intrigued, at least. So let's keep on. Let's give it a shot. What do you got,
When you think
Max?
of cake, the first thing that comes to mind naturally is tomato soup. Okay,
Oh my
maybe.
God.
But it turns
that
out
like
that for much of
Campbell's
the
thing or
20th
something?
century, tomato soup cake was a thing. And
Apparently
I
so.
just gotta see what this thing tastes like. So I'm making a tomato soup cake.
It is a
with cream
Campbell's. Oh
cheese
my
icing
God.
Using a recipe from
Oh,
the
look at
Great
that
Depression.
frosting. Jesus.
So thank you to Trade Coffee for sponsoring this video as I try my hand at one of the oddest concepts for a cake I have ever come across. Tomato soup cake. This time on Tasting History.
Well, ketchup, I know, has a lot of sugar added to it, so maybe there's something there.
In the
I don't know.
1930s, during the Great Depression, people were eating a lot of foods that we might think of as rather unorthodox today.
Well.
Ketchup soup, water pie, mashed potatoes with peanut butter.
Peanut
really
butter.
anything that was cheap and filling. And that
Yeah,
is
because you
exactly
kinda had to
what
make do,
tomato
didn't
soup
ya?
cake is. It is filling because it's a cake, and it's also cheap because it could be made without the expensive milk and eggs that most cakes during that time called for. But even then, it was a rather perplexing dessert. In 1934, the Detroit
look at
Free
that.
Press asked its readers, did you ever hear of using tomato soup in a cake?
In a
And did you
cake?
ever hear of a frosting made with cream cheese? If you didn't, then
I
we
think
have
cream
some
cheese frosting is a
surprises
thing,
for you
isn't it?
today, for we have collected several unusual cake recipes, which I am sure you will be glad
Joseph
to
Campbell
add to your
Preserve
repertoire.
Co.
The particular
I guess that
thing
makes-
about
that's
these
where
recipes
the
is that a
brand comes
person
from.
who wasn't in on the secret would have no idea of the unusual ingredients used in making
Sorry.
these cakes, but would only know that they were particularly delicious. And so I want to know if they're telling
Hopefully-
the truth. Will
hopefully
I
it
be
is
able
delicious.
to tell that tomato soup was actually used in this cake, other than the fact that I'm making it? I mean, when I taste it, will my taste buds know that
Just give
it's
it to, like,
there?
a partner or
And
something.
fortunately, the newspaper gave us a recipe that we can follow. So it starts by calling for 1 standard can condensed tomato soup.
wonder what
The standard
cuisine
in the
was in
1930s and
that place
today
that
is
time.
10.75 ounces. Then a
Most people
half
talk
cup
about
or
fancy
115
places.
grams
Oh,
of butter,
interesting,
1
yeah.
cup or 200 grams of sugar, 2
Sugar.
cups or 225 grams cake flour, 2 teaspoons baking
Well,
powder,
you say
1
that the milk and the
teaspoon
eggs
baking
were-
soda, a half teaspoon of
were,
cloves,
very
1
expensive.
teaspoon of
What about the
nutmeg,
what
1
about the
teaspoon of
sugar?
cinnamon, and a pinch of salt. Then a half teaspoon of vanilla,
And
a
the
half
vanilla.
cup or 65 grams of raisins, and
Raisins?
a half cup or 50 grams
What
of
in the
chopped
heck?
nuts. I used walnuts. And the original recipe does give the option to use a full cup of raisins or a full cup of nuts, or you can do half and half, which is what I am doing.
So why
Then
not
the
both?
recipe says to add melted butter to soup and combine with the sugar. Sift the spices, soda, salt, and baking powder with the flour and add to the first mixture. Then add raisins or nut meats and vanilla.
Nut
Pour
meats.
into
Oh my
greased
God.
loaf pan and bake at 325 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 minutes to 90 minutes, depending on the shape of the pan. So here's the thing. I am going
Yeah.
to follow this recipe exactly as it says, meaning
Crazy.
that I am going to use melted
I
butter.
know.
But if you want
Hey
to
there,
make
Thunder.
this
How's it
recipe,
going?
I would suggest you use softened butter and
Softened
you
butter.
cream that together with the sugar before adding the tomato soup. That is going to let you have a much lighter and fluffier texture to the finished cake.
This is gonna be a
rather than
lot
using
more-
melted
lot more
butter.
denser,
But
it
since I'm
seems.
following it exactly
We're
as
learning
Miss
about
Marion
tomato
F.
soup
Sawyer,
cake,
that's
Thunder.
what the recipe says, I am using melted butter. And if it leaves me with a dense and dry cake, then that's just the way that it's gotta be.
I'm doing all right.
And
Doing
I will
okay.
all the more depend on having a nice cup of
Knock on
coffee
wood,
to
my,
wet my whistle and get that cake down. A cup of
my
coffee
connection
from
is
today's
staying
sponsor,
stable
Trade.
now.
Trade
Oh,
is a coffee
here's the
subscription
ad
service that
here.
works with over 55
Here's
local
that.
roasters throughout the
That's
United
nice,
States
like,
to bring
I'm not a
freshly
yeah
roasted
tomato soup
coffee
cake.
straight to your
Yes,
door. And with over
it was
500
a
different
recipe from the
coffees
Great
made
Depression, so I guess that
with an
really tells you all you need to know
personally
about how it came into
suite
being.
of coffees geared to your taste.
Just said,
It's based
coffee.
on your
I don't drink
flavor
coffee.
preferences as well as
Really,
how you
I
like
don't
to drink your
really
coffee.
got into it or
French
felt the
press,
need
drip,
because I
espresso,
wake up
or
early
latte,
pretty
especially during the
naturally.
summer.
So
It's
whenever
all
I'm at
through
like
all the time.
a Starbucks or
I like
somebody
light,
wants to
medium
get me
roast,
something from there, I usually just ask for a hot chocolate. Just need to get one of those things, from, like those versions of Trade. It was all different types of hot cocoa.
I
think that would be pretty fun, especially during the winter.
And right now, they are offering 30% off of new subscriptions when you use my link in the description, drinktrade.com/MaxMiller. I being Max Miller. That is
Really? I never knew.
drinktrade.com/MaxMiller to get 30% off of your first subscription. And now, with your coffee in hand, let's make some cake.
Drink coffee either.
So the first thing to do is, if
slice
you
the
are
cake.
using raisins, you want to toss them in a little flour.
Why?
This will help stop them from all falling to the bottom of the cake batter once we add them. Then set those aside and pour your condensed tomato soup into a large bowl, and then add in the melted butter and stir until completely combined. Then stir in the sugar, and if you are creaming your butter with the sugar, do that
some sort of weird ketchup.
In a separate bowl, you want to sift your cake flour. Then sift in the baking powder and the baking soda, followed by the spices, the nutmeg, the cinnamon, and the cloves. Whisk all of the ingredients together and then add the salt. And you'll notice that I am using a large grain salt, but if I had to do it again, I would use a small grain salt, simply because the large grain salt was too big to pass through the sifter, something I only learned as I started to sift the flour mixture into the soup and butter bowl. So I ended up sifting in the flour just a bit at a time, and then just had to kind of dump the salt on top of it. It's fine, not a big deal, it's not really going to affect the cake, but, you know, use small salt. Once all of the dry ingredients are added, then start to fold them into the soup mixture.
Look at this.
And immediately the baking soda and baking powder will start to react to the acid inside the tomato soup. That is what is going to leaven this cake. So really, once you add those two ingredients,
it's gotta go. You gotta go fast because it's off-gassing.
Otherwise, you're gonna lose all of the carbon dioxide before it actually gets into the oven. Once the flour is folded in, add the vanilla and stir that in, and then add the pre-floured raisins and the nuts into the batter and stir just enough until they are well distributed. Then pour the batter into a greased loaf tin. You can also use a square or round cake tin.
Recipes of Average Kowalski.
Smooth the top and then pop it into the oven at 325 degrees Fahrenheit, 165 Celsius for, I don't know, as long as it takes to bake. Seeing as the original recipe says to bake it for 45 minutes to 90 minutes, depending on the shape of the pan. I'm sorry, that is a massive difference in bake time. I'm not sure what shape pan is going to require double the bake time than another pan. I really don't know.
Maybe
but
like
between that and the melted butter, I'm kind of starting to think that I'm going to end up with a baked monstrosity here. Anyway, I checked mine at around 50 minutes, and a toothpick came out fairly clean, so I would say 45 to 50 minutes should do. Then you need to take it out of the oven and let it cool completely. And it does need to cool completely before we add the icing, lest all of the icing slough off like the skin of a well-done turkey. So as this cake cools, let me know in the comments what other interesting, historical, vintage recipes you would like to see me tackle here on the channel as I tell you a bit about the history of tomato soup cake.
Okay, now let's see how this thing came into being.
Tomato soup cake, like most foods, doesn't have a specific point of origin. Maybe someone did knowingly invent this cake, or maybe it just happened out of an act of desperation. Very often, cakes that use baking soda to do the leavening use buttermilk as the acid to get that chemical reaction going. And as someone who will often start baking without making sure that they have all of the ingredients on hand, I can only imagine someone in their kitchen making a cake and opening the fridge and seeing that there is no buttermilk there, so they frantically search for something else that has acid and finds tomato soup. Tomatoes have acid, so let's give that a shot, and voila, the tomato soup cake was born. Or at least, that's how I'm picturing it going down. What I can say for certain is that this cake was not invented during the Great Depression, despite what you will read online.
We're learning about
online will
tomato
say.
soup
There's
cake.
even one cookbook, I think it came out in the 90s, that is very confident in saying that this is one of the few old recipes that can be precisely dated. It was developed in
this is a famous Great
Depression
photo.
Of the Depression. No, it wasn't, because with a very quick search of newspapers from before 1932, you will see recipes for this cake. Though I think my favorite is actually a slight variation on this cake from 1929 that appeared in the Honolulu Star Bulletin. It said, tomato cake is unusual recipe suggested by class in cooking.
Hawaii?
It is also known as lunch cake. That instead of tomato soup, it uses a can of actual tomatoes strained and stewed. But other recipes, which do use proper canned tomato soup, appear in many newspapers leading up to 1932, including one
There's such a thing as tomato ice cream?
uses
That one I
melted
can
butter,
believe.
like the one that we're making today, and claims that it's the type of cake that will appeal to the entire family, from the youngest
but they were
up
using
to the
like
oldest,
a whole
and
can of
particularly
condensed
to the
tomato
male
soup, like
members
from
of the
Campbell's
household.
in this
What a
recipe.
Weird thing to say. why particularly the male members? Because there is no further explanation why that would be. So if you have any ideas why male members of the family would particularly like this cake, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now,
I don't know.
while it is clear that this cake was definitely being made before the Great Depression, which started in 1929, it was not always under the name tomato soup cake. Like the recipe that we're making today says that it could also sometimes be called soup to nuts cake.
Soup to
there was
nuts?
also believe it or not cake, husband's cake, and mystery cake.
Mystery
now, many
cake?
people
That's even
claim
more
that
suspicious.
Mystery cake was another name for tomato soup cake, and it
What do you think of
was,
this?
and
Oh.
it wasn't, because mystery cake was really a whole genre of cakes that were popular at the time that had a mystery ingredient, something that wouldn't typically be in the cake that didn't necessarily flavor the cake, and so that would leave the taster
Hungarian
with
stew
a
or
bit of a
something? I can watch that
mystery
bit
to
later.
figure out what that
striking.
ingredient
Oh,
was.
okay, cool.
In addition, these mystery cakes were often
Mystery
the subject
cake.
of
Can you
competitions
name it?
looking for the best new name for the mystery cake. They would
Why?
give the recipe, you would make it at home, and then you would send in the name that you think it should be called. I do love that at one
That's pretty
point
funny.
they had to start adding the fact that you shouldn't mail in the actual cake, and I just
Mail
wonder
in the
how many
actual
people
cake.
mailed in physical cakes before they had to put that on the advertisement.
That,
by the
like, it would come
mid-1930s,
in
while
all,
some
like,
people did still call the cake by
probably
other
all, like,
names,
moldy
tomato
from
soup
the-
cake
depending on
seems to have
where-
kind
on
of
how far the
become
milk-
the
mail
standard.
took.
And it was somewhat popular. It was being made especially in houses that were trying to stretch a dollar, or pinch a penny, I guess, back then, because $1 was a lot of money. Mainly because it was cheap, but it was also different. Smart hostesses like the novelty
Different.
of this tempting tomato soup cake with its velvety cream cheese icing, and budget-minded housewives prick up their ears when they learn that both cake and frosting are inexpensive.
Chicago
He then goes on to
Tribune.
give the recipe for the frosting. But should you want the actual recipe for the cake, well,
You gotta
then
pay for
Mary
it.
Mead will send you the recipe for the tomato soup cake on receipt of a self-addressed stamped envelope. Today we
Okay.
complain about having to scroll to the bottom of a website just to get to the actual recipe,
Take a good
and
soup
that
cake
is
over
rather annoying.
soup flavored
but nowhere
cough
near
drop
as
any day.
annoying as
The
having
soup
to
flavored cough drop.
write into
Yeah,
a
well.
newspaper with an envelope and a stamp to ask
call
for
it
a
a
recipe,
mistake,
which would
maybe.
then take weeks to get sent to you. So we
I'm
are
sure
rather
probably people
spoiled
have said
today,
that. I
just
wouldn't
when
be
it comes
surprised.
to recipes. But it is kind of a double-edged sword, this
Mm-hmm.
easy access to information, because while you can get a recipe on the fly, you can also complain about said recipe very, very easily.
Yeah.
Today, the comment sections below recipes are often filled with complaints, sometimes
They let us
warranted
know whenever
complaints,
it's shown.
but sometimes it's people
It is real?
mad
Oh.
that their whipped cream didn't come out, only to tell
Interesting.
people that they didn't use cream, they used almond milk, and are still mad that it didn't come out. So if you had a complaint, though, in the 1930s or 40s
You had
about
to
a
put
recipe,
a lot more effort into it.
you actually had to write in to make your complaint known.
Yeah.
Phooey to your professor, do it. Before he goes around telling people how to cook, does he ever think
Phooey.
of trying out his
Wow.
own recipes? I bit on that tomato soup cake concoction
feel
in
like it would
Friday's
taste a lot
paper.
with seasoned
It
pack
was
of
a
Goya,
waste
maybe.
of time, effort, and ingredients.
In the
After
previous
eating the
stream,
cake,
we
my little
actually
girl was
reacted to
terribly sick to her
Max
stomach,
making
and my husband
sort of
felt
like
too bad to
proto
go to work
bouillon
Monday.
cubes, like soup
Before you
cubes.
print any more
That's what made
come-ons
what-
like
what they
tomato
have.
soup
Yeah.
cake, please cancel my subscription to your dumb paper.
Cancel my description.
Dislike, unsub. I can't believe somebody actually wrote into the newspaper writing that, but it's a real quote. Anyway, for me today, it's
more
very
people who-
easy
things
to find
become
all
different,
these
the more
different
things stay
tomato
the same,
soup
I say,
recipes because I have
see.
access to databases
That's
like
it, those cubes.
newspapers.com
Yeah.
where they have all the newspapers that I
They
can
called
just
it pocket
search
soup
through and find them.
in the video.
But that was not the case in the 1930s and 40s. If you wanted a recipe for this cake, you either had to have a friend send it to you, write into the newspaper to get it, or just hope that your local newspaper printed this recipe. So while it seems like this recipe was absolutely everywhere at the time, it actually was not. It was really still quite a novelty to most
It's just
people.
like a lot of
and
people were just, like,
very few
writing
people
about it and
seem
wanted to
have
write about
even
it.
known about its existence. People
Oh,
like
what the-
Gene Autry, the singing cowboy himself. When he came across tomato soup cake, he was plumb flabbergasted. I've
Flabbergasted.
eaten a lot of strange things on the range, such as soft-boiled bacon, beans
Ugh.
that turned out to be half gravel, son of a gun stew, and bread you could patch tires with. but I've never eaten tomato
Brand
soup
that you can
cake.
patch tires
Those chuck
with.
wagon pilots are the greatest experimenters you ever saw. When they hear about tomato soup cake, they're going to try to improve on it. One of these days, some weary cowboys, after a hard day in the saddle, are going to ride up to the chuck wagon and be
chuck
dished
wagon?
up some
It's like
clam
a-
chowder cake or split pea pie.
Like
But while
a
tomato
proto,
soup cake
like,
may have
food
remained
truck,
a
I
rather
guess?
niche baked good, it was the perfect baked good for the people who were actually making the canned tomato soup.
Like Campbell's.
During the 1930s, recipes start cropping up that suggest using specific brands, namely Heinz tomato soup
Heinz.
and Campbell's tomato soup. And it was Campbell's who really went in on this. See, Campbell's was the first commercial producer of canned tomato soup in 1895, and then condensed tomato soup.
Look
years
at that
later.
ad.
And it was an immediate success, partly because it was quick to make, partly because it was very inexpensive, and partly because it was marketed by the Campbell's kids.
Ooh, look at
These
look
were
at
a
these,
series of chubby-faced
like
cartoon
almost
characters that
Sour
featured
Patch Kids,
prominently in
like
Campbell's marketing campaigns for decades.
so-
They were
so really
absolutely everywhere,
puffy
and they even
cheeks.
sold them as physical
Hansel
dolls.
and Gretel.
But most often, they would be shown in ads alongside a little poem touting the Campbell's
stream
brand,
buffering. Oh,
even
no.
if
Oh,
the
no.
poems at times were historically
Yeah.
questionable. Like the time that the Campbell's soup kid, dressed as George Washington, declared, "Like Washington, ere deeds are done, with forethought I prepare. I feed my troops on Campbell's soups, so let the foe beware." So while these lovable, if maybe a little creepy, children did their marketing thing for the Campbell's soup, the soup was still only good for eating out of a bowl. And how much soup can a person eat? So their sales were limited. And so when they came across this recipe for tomato soup cake, Campbell's was like, yoink, I'll take that.
Yoink it,
They actually
wow.
started with something slightly different and much less popular, and that was the tomato soup-based steamed fruit and nut pudding, which came out in 1940. But it didn't exactly hit the mark because steamed puddings were kind of losing steam here in the United States. And so in 1942, they released a Halloween spice cake made
Halloween
with tomato
spice
soup,
cake?
which was essentially just
It's so
the
faded,
tomato
Jesus.
soup cake that we're having today, but topped with a bunch of Halloween decorations. Then they took off those decorations and had just the tomato soup spiced cake. Though at first they made it without any cream cheese frosting, and it was actually well after the rationing of World War II ended that they
Okay, I
started
see.
to add that cream cheese frosting. This book, which a viewer sent me, which I think is from like the 1960s,
Cooking with
does
soup,
have
huh?
the recipe in it, and it does
that's
have
some-
the
that's very
cream
fun.
cheese frosting, along with several other cake recipes, along with like 200 other canned soup recipes, and books like this that are cookbooks based around a single company, a single brand, were really popular for much of the 20th century. I don't really see them anymore, but for a long time, really big. Now, while the original tomato soup cake was a spiced cake, the Campbell's brand went on to
Spiced cake.
expand the tomato soup cake universe with a chocolate version in 1951.
chocolate tomato
and this was
cake?
followed
Oh my
up by an
goodness.
apricot or
That is-
prune upside down tomato
that-
soup
that
cake
is
in
excessive, I
54,
feel.
and a rosy chiffon tomato soup cake in 56. Now, by the 1960s, boxed cake mix had really become popular.
Oh, there we
and so
are.
Campbell's began
That's what we know.
investigating ways to use these to make the cake. And in
they're
1966,
integrating
after
like a
years of
devil's food
testing,
cake with their- with
Campbell's
their-
came
with
up
their-
with something that their archives
soup.
dubbed Experiment Number 38. Kind
That's
of
an
reminds
ominous
me of
one.
Lilo and Stitch.
Yeah,
Stitch
yeah.
being
Oh
Experiment
no,
66.
Lilo and Stitch. Oh,
And
how
essentially,
poignant.
this was a
The,
version
voice
of the
actress
cake
for
that
Lilo
just
passed
used
away
a box of spiced
rather
cake
recently,
mix,
like the other day,
a
so
can
whoops.
of Campbell's tomato soup, and some water, half a cup of water, and 2 eggs. And really, the eggs were actually completely optional. The thing
Okay.
is, while this recipe would have made making the cake easier, it came at a time when the glory days of tomato soup cake were long behind her. By the
Probably, yeah.
1960s, when you do see recipes, they are written as if this is a dish from a bygone era. Tomato soup cake was the talk of every city, town, and hamlet in the country about 30 years ago. Many modern homemakers still like to bake this moist spice cake studded with raisins. It can be made with a mix, 1960s style, or by the
1960s
mix
style?
from scratch recipe of the 30s. And I love that even in 1967, it had to be explained to incredulous readers who had just never heard of such a thing. In addition to scout work,
Yep, sorry.
Work, music, and
Making sure
collecting
that's good.
bric-a-brac, Mrs. Miller loves to bake tomato soup cake. Yes, tomato soup cake. If you like a dessert that's not overly sweet but is still dessert, advises Mrs. Miller, try tomato
Not
soup
overly
cake.
sweet,
It's
but still
rich and
dessert.
filling, but just a little bit different. And believe it or not, it doesn't taste like soup, especially with cream cheese frosting. So in the 1960s, it was like they were rediscovering this dish from the past, and we are still doing it today, because the first time that I ever heard about this dessert was when Bido and Hollis made it over on TikTok. And ever since, I have wanted to try it for myself to see if I could actually pick out the tomato soup in the cake's flavor. But to do so, I need to actually finish making it, and that means finishing the frosting. And there is a cream cheese frosting recipe that comes from the same newspaper where we got our cake, the 1934 newspaper. And it just calls for 1.5 cups or 180 grams of confectioner's sugar, 1 package of cream cheese, and a half teaspoon of vanilla. So use beaters to soften up the cream cheese, and then
aerate it and
the
then add in the
sugar just a little at a time. And you just want to do a little bit and on low speed, otherwise the sugar goes absolutely everywhere. Once the sugar is fully incorporated, beat in the vanilla, and then spread the icing all over that fully
That's not cream
cake.
nor cheese.
Then slice and serve.
There it is.
And here we are. Tomato soup cake
there
using a
was
recipe
cheese, yeah.
from the Great Depression. I will say the color is maybe a little influenced by the tomato soup. Which
Really?
totally makes sense.
It looks so orangey.
But it doesn't smell like tomato soup. So here we go.
You back, gamers? Nice, good. Just in time for him to taste this cake. Surprising, huh?
No tomato soup flavor found. I need another bite.
He said, really? It was so funny. He's impressed, it seems.
That's good cake. That's
Really?
good cake. Reminds me of carrot cake. Kind of.
Kinda. It is like another vegetable cake.
You know, it's a lot of the same spices, especially this one. It has the raisins and the nuts and everything. So very carrot cake-ish. It is moist. I think it would be a little bit lighter if I creamed the butter, but not a lot. It's not super dense. It's not super stodgy or anything like that. It is super good, though.
Okay,
and
excellent
super
post.
easy.
Yes.
And you should absolutely make it, because why not? You need to be able to tell people, yes, I have tried tomato soup cake, and yes,
It's good
it
cake.
is quite good. Now, there's actually a famous story about this cake, or rather a person making tomato soup cake, and that was the author Sylvia Plath, who got a recipe from her mother in 1961, and she made it, and it did not go well.
Oh, really?
She says that it was probably had to do with the fact that her mother and the recipe came from America, but she was actually living in England at the time. So then in a letter that she wrote to her mother, she said, "I didn't think to question, but our cans seem to be bigger than yours, as my cake was a bit
wet.
This is not wet. This is just nice and moist, and absolutely as a cake should be. Again, super easy. Go make it. There's no reason not to. And I will see you next time on Tasting History.
Well, that was like a really interesting one. So tomato soup cake, apparently it is pretty good. Alrighty then. So please let me know in the comments if you've actually made tomato soup cake, and how you liked it. Alright then, everybody. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!